Hey everybody, what is up? Friends helping friends. It's good to be here Tuesday afternoon. Man, I just first want to say it's so cool being a part of this group. It's so fun. Even just this week, hearing different stories of how different people are feeling connected, watching. There's a girl, you know who you are, last Tuesday came up to me and just said, she's a part of the group and she's loving it. So I love this group. If you're just watching videos, I want to encourage you, invite people to the group, right? Engage into this. Please don't be a person that just watches the video, but be a person that is engaging with the videos. Write in the comments. Even if it's like, oh my gosh, I don't, when the posts come up or the videos are coming, it's so cool. And it's kind of refreshing to know that as these questions are coming up, right, as these videos are coming out, other people engaging with it, it just feels like a better community. So I hope you're engaging with it. Today, we're going to be talking about soap, an easy way. If you've never done devotions, it's a really cool, easy way to do devotions. So part of my job here is leading our youth group. And one of the things is we teach soap quite often because a lot of students, as they start to follow Jesus, are like, well, how do I do devotions? How do I read devotions? And this is one of my favorite ways to teach because A, it's really easy to follow along and remember. And then two is I find it super beneficial for me. Even over the years that I've done soap, I don't necessarily bust out my journal and write S-O-A-P. And we're going to go over in a second what those mean. But I still find myself doing the process even in my head of like, as I read scripture, I go through the steps. Even though I'm not necessarily writing them out, I still do them. And so we're going to do soap. I encourage you to be doing it with us because I love soap. I mean, it's so cliche, but it's a good way to clean your soul. I got some Dr. Sasquatch soap coming in today. And so I'm excited to do that. Also, big shout out to Rob Shields for straight up saying he does devotions on his toilet last week. That was stinking funny. But also every guy totally understands. So today I'm going to share with you a little of my soap that I did yesterday. I was actually reading this a lot yesterday. In our Advent series we've been going through, yesterday was Matthew 5, 1 through 12. And part of the soap method is, the cool thing is you can do this with really any chunk of scripture, right? So if you're going through a series, this is really easy to do. You just kind of read for example, I read Matthew 1 through 12, right? And as I was reading it, what I'm really looking for is that first step, which is S, right? So S stands for scripture. And you want to look at scripture that pops out to you. And over the years, a lot of people have asked, well, what pops out to me? And honestly, it doesn't really matter why it pops out to you. It just pops out to you, right? As you're reading, sometimes it pops out to me because I'm confused by it, right? Like I read a point of scripture and I'm like, what does that mean? But it's sticking out to me. A lot of times I feel like I relate to it. A lot of times I have questions, but sometimes honestly, I'll write down the scripture just because I don't know why this pops out to me, but it just pops out to me. And so that's the first part of doing soap, is writing out scripture that pops out to you. So when I did it yesterday, I read Matthew 5, 1 through 12. And actually verse 12 stood out to me. It says, rejoice and be glad because great is the reward in heaven. In the same way that persecuted the prophets who were before you. And the rest of the chapter kind of talks about why people are blessed, right? So blessed are those who are merciful because they've shown mercy. Blessed are the pure heart for they see God, right? And so Matthew is talking about, or Jesus in this instance is talking about why people are blessed. And he ends it, which really stuck out to me, is rejoice and be glad. So the next part of doing soap is you have S, which is scripture. Write out scripture that sticks out to you. O is for observing. And this is honestly one of my favorite parts because I love observing scripture. I write down everything. Questions I have, thoughts I have, things I observe. One of my observations I read yesterday was I noticed that he says, rejoice and be glad for reward of heaven, right after he says, blessed are those who hurt and persecute you, right? So it's almost like Jesus says, listen, like things are going to suck, but you need to rejoice about it. And so I wrote that down. I said, hey, I noticed this. A lot of times when I'm doing devos, I'll write down questions I might not know the answers to. Why is Jesus doing this? Why is he writing this out? You're really just writing out observations you see in the text. And so this to me sometimes will take a while, right? One of the things I noticed was I said for verses 3 through 10 are simple things Jesus said are reasons to be blessed about. And Jesus ends with rejoicing about being blessed, right? Rejoicing about being with God. And I'll just write down tons and tons of observations, good observations, bad observations, whatever it is, just write it down. So that's S is for scripture, O is for observation, and then A is for application. And now when I teach this with kids and students, I say this is the most important part, right? The reason you do devotions is A, you want to have a personal relationship with Jesus, and B, you want it to actually affect your life, right? You actually want it to count. For me, I love when it applies to my life, right? I don't want to just read scripture and see it. I want it to apply to my life. So A is for application. And this is, if I would say, if you did 5 minutes of devos a day, soap devo day, I would say 3 minutes should be spent on application. If you did 30 minutes a day, 20 minutes should be on application, right? Like, feel free to stick on application for as long as you want. You might need to pray about it. You might need to ask God, like, God, this scripture sticks out to me. This is what I'm observing about your word. How does this apply to me? And so, yesterday I said, God, I need to start focusing on my own personal life. Just the last couple weeks, I feel like not necessarily like persecution or false kinds of evils, but just a lot of negativity in life, a lot of bad things I feel like happening because I follow Jesus. And so what I decided yesterday is I said, God, I'm going to focus on rejoicing when I'm in hard times. I'm going to focus on saying, God, I'm with you. I'm rejoicing when hard times hit, because when things are not hard, I probably should be worried, right? So I listed out a bunch of things I wanted to rejoice about and be happy about. And I took today as saying, God, the next couple of days, I'm going to rejoice. Every single time I hit a hardship, I'm going to rejoice about it, because according to your word, when I'm being persecuted, that means I'm following you. And then the last part of SOAP is, so you got S is scripture, O is observation, A is application, and P is prayer. And then you just kind of write out your prayer, so write out, hey, God, help me with this. God, here's my application. God, thank you for pointing this out. Over the years, there's times where I haven't written out my prayer. I'm just like, I'm just going to pray. And then there's times where I'm like, I'm going to write it out. And I've been way more happier with the times I've written out my prayer. A lot of it is because I look back on my life and see how God has provided. I see how God has answered those prayers. So if you're a person that's like, hey, I don't like writing out my devos, I don't like writing out my prayers, I want to encourage you to do it, because you might thank yourself in the future. You might say, God, I really appreciate you for answering that prayer or being with me. Or it's just a reminder. It's a faith reminder of saying, God, I remember you when you were with me, and I need that today. I need that reminder. And so that is SOAP, man. I encourage you to soap it up. Maybe you've been doing devos forever. This is just one method. There's a lot of different methods out there, Lectio Divino, PBJ. But man, I encourage you, if you haven't ever soaped, try it out, right? And today, why don't we do this? Write down the last thing God said to you during your devos, and share that, right? So if you're doing soap, write down your last application point. If you're just doing devos, write down the last thing you feel like God said to you, right? Let's share what God is speaking to us in our personal devotion time. All right, guys, have a wonderful day and a Merry Christmas.